Welcome to the Communion of Saints, Part 2. Well, today I'm going to tell you how I chose my saint, or maybe failed to choose my saint, and how Aaron and Nathan came to choose their saints. Well, what saints are we talking about here? We're going to talk about the Blessed Virgin Mary. We're going to talk about Kateri Tekakwitha and Saint Nicholas today. So we're going to start out talking about the Blessed Virgin Mary. I have this beautiful statue here that my sister gave me. Mary is known for all of her virtues. Mary is patient. Mary is prudent. Mary is pure. She's gentle. She's kind. She's full of grace, as we say in the Hail Mary, full of grace. So how did I accidentally choose the Blessed Virgin Mary as my confirmation saint? When I was of confirmation age, which was age 10 for me, I chose Marie as my confirmation name. I did not choose a specific Marie, but I chose Marie because it was a form of Mary, and my dad wanted all three of the girls in our family to be called Mary, and none of us are called Mary. The closest that came to be was the middle sister, who's not me. She has the middle name of Marie. So I guess in honor of my dad, who wished we were all called, I think, Mary Ann and Mary Ruth and Mary Sue and all those kinds of things. I'm not exactly sure. I thought I will choose the form of it, Marie. I kind of liked Marie better than Mary, just like my mom, I guess. So anyway, I chose Marie for my saint without choosing any specific saint, which I'm encouraging you to do, not just to pick a name, but to find a specific saint that you're choosing as your confirmation name. Well, a few years later, as a young adult, I started looking through different Marie saints, and then the Mary saints, and the Margaret Mary saints, and was really struggling to find one that I connected with, because I thought, well, even though I didn't choose a specific one, I'd like to develop a devotion to a specific saint that relates to my confirmation name. Well, I really had a lot of trouble with this, and then one day when I was talking to our current priest of the time, Father Garrett, I was telling him my story, and he says, oh my goodness, you have to choose the Blessed Mother. What other Marie or Mary would you possibly want to choose with all of her virtues? And she's a patron of mothers and so forth. So that's my story of how I chose the Blessed Virgin Mary to be my confirmation saint, even if I did choose it a little bit later. Erin was confirmed as a senior in high school, and she picked her saint out quite a while before she had to do so, when she had read this little book here about Kateri Tekakwitha, and that is the saint she chose. Kateri is a Native American saint, and she lived in New York. She had a warrior Mohawk father and a Christian mother, but never really was able to practice her Christian faith, or her mother's Christian faith, when she was younger. Her parents both ended up dying of smallpox, and she also contracted smallpox. She survived, but she lost a lot of her vision. She did not have very great vision after having the smallpox disease. Well, some Jesuit missionaries came through this Native American camp, and she told them that she wanted to be baptized, and she was. She became a Christian, but it was difficult to live a Christian lifestyle amongst these warrior Indians, and she ended up leaving and traveling a pretty good distance to Canada, where she spent the rest of her very small number of years, since she did not live to be very old, living with the Francis Xavier missions there. Well, she is known as the Lily of the Mohawks, and she is a patron of the environment. And she became a saint. I think this is one of Erin's connections to her too. She's a more modern day saint. She was canonized in 2012, which is the same year our family traveled to New York. Our third saint today is Saint Nicholas. This is Nathan's saint, and he struggled a little bit to figure out who he wanted for his confirmation saint. But who doesn't love generous and giving and kind Saint There's not a lot of really confirmed stories of St. Nicholas, but it is known that he was born to some very wealthy Christian parents, and that they died, and he was left as an orphan. So he went to live in a monastery with his uncle, where he decided he was going to be a priest, and he was going to give away much of his wealth and his possessions. And so I'm going to read you a little story. This is the most common story I always find about St. Nicholas. In Patara, there lived a family that had fallen on hard times. They had once been wealthy, but misfortunes had overtaken them, and now they were so poor they barely had enough to live on. The father tried to find work, but when people saw his soft hands, which had never known any kind of hard labor, they took him to be lazy and turned him away. The man had 3 daughters, all of marriageable age, but their chances of finding husbands were grim because the father could offer no dowries. In those days, a young woman needed a dowry to get an offer in marriage. Their financial situation grew desperate, and the father realized that the only way to ensure the survival of his children was to sell them into servitude. At least that way they would have enough to eat. When the news of the family's plight reached Nicholas, he at once set about thinking about ways to help them. He remembered Jesus' teaching that when you give to the poor, don't let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your giving can be done in secret. That's from Matthew 6:3-4. He soon came up with a plan. That night he put several gold coins in a bag and started out for the home of the father and the 3 daughters. The hour was late and the streets were deserted when he arrived, and inside the house the family was sleeping. Nicholas crept to the window and reached through and dropped in the bag of gold. Some say it landed in a shoe, and others say it was in a stocking that was left hanging to dry. He hurried away, though, before anyone saw him. The next morning, the family discovered the bag of gold, and weeping with joy and astonishment, they fell to their knees to thank God for this generous gift. Not only did they have money to live on for some time, there was enough to provide a generous dowry for the oldest daughter, and she was soon married. When Nicholas saw the happiness that his gift had caused, he decided to grant the second daughter a dowry too. So he went to the house at night, as before, and dropped the second bag through the window. The next morning, more tears of joy and astonishment, and more thanks to God were given for this miraculous gift. And the second daughter had her dowry and was soon married. The father dared to hope that his third daughter would also receive a gift to allow her to marry, but now he was determined to find out who this earthly angel was that had saved them. Finally, late one other night, a mysterious bag of gold came flying through the window. The man rushed out of the house, ran after the shadowy figure, and caught him by the cloak. When he recognized Nicholas, he fell to his knees and began to kiss the hands that had helped his family so graciously. But Nicholas asked him to stand up, and he was told to thank God instead. He begged the father not to tell anyone the secret about who had left the gold. Well, despite longing for anonymity, Nicholas's act of generosity did set him on a path to become the world's most famous gift giver. It's also an interesting story on how St. Nicholas became a bishop. They were having trouble selecting the next bishop, and one person suggested that, hey, tomorrow morning during morning prayers, the first person to walk through the door, we shall name him bishop. Well, it was Nicholas, and he became the Bishop of Myre. St. Nicholas is the patron of children, as you might have guessed, just like we have Mary here, who's the patron of mothers, and our environmental saint, St. Kateri. But we also have St. Nicholas, who's the patron of children and of sailors. And why is that? Well, he seems to rescue people who are on ships in storms. There are many tales of how they think the ship is going to be sunk. They start to pray, and St. Nicholas ends up helping them. And many times when they get off at port, there was St. Nicholas right there in front of them. So there's just another tale of St. Nicholas. So I hope you've enjoyed our stories of how 3 of us Becks chose and who we chose for our confirmation saints.